Samuel Hayes had always dreamed of owning a piece of land. For most of his life, he had worked under the hot sun, helping other men build their ranches and fortunes. He rode from town to town with nothing more than a worn-out saddlebag, a hat that had seen better days, and a heart full of quiet hopes. Some men were born rich, but Samuel was not one of them. He had built his life with his hands and his back, working through long summers and cold winters. In the early spring of 1887, Samuel's horse carried him into a small frontier town at the edge of the prairie. The town was dusty and dry, with wooden houses leaning slightly in the wind. A sign creaked above the door of the general store. Chickens scratched in the dirt road, and the smell of hay and fresh bread floated in the air. Samuel tied his horse outside the saloon and walked slowly down the street, his boots leaving soft prints in the dust. He hadn't planned to stay long, but something caught his eye. A large wooden board was nailed to the wall near the courthouse. Painted in bold black letters were the words, "Land Auction Saturday." His heart gave a small jump. Auctions meant opportunity. Land was being sold, and maybe, just maybe, he could afford a small corner of the world to call his own. The next morning, Samuel woke early, brushed the dust off his jacket, and walked to the auction yard. A small crowd had gathered, local farmers, cattle hands, and curious townsfolk. The auctioneer, a man with a loud voice and a wide-brimmed hat, stood on a wooden platform calling out prices. Lot after lot was sold. A small field here, a broken-down barn there. Samuel watched as each bidder raised their hands, some with confidence, others with quiet hope like his own. Then the auctioneer called out something that made everyone whisper. "Next up, Carter Ranch." The name hung in the air like a ghost. Samuel didn't know the story yet, but he could feel the weight of the name in the crowd's reaction. People shifted on their feet. A woman covered her mouth. A man gave a quiet shake of his head. Samuel turned to an older man beside him and asked in a low voice, "What's the story with that ranch?" The old man leaned closer. He used to belong to Henry Carter. Fine land, good water. But after he passed, well, nobody's touched the place. Some say it's unlucky. Some say it's too much trouble. Been sitting empty for months. "Why hasn't anyone bought it?" Samuel asked. The old man gave a small shrug. "People talk. Stories spread. Folks don't always buy what they can't understand." Samuel looked toward the auctioneer. If the land had a bad reputation, maybe it would sell for less. And less was exactly what Samuel could afford. The auctioneer raised his hammer. "We'll start the bid at $500. Nobody raised a hand. "400, the auctioneer tried again. Silence. Samuel felt his heart thump. He didn't have much money, but this was a chance he might never get again. 300. A couple in the back whispered to each other but stayed quiet. 200. Samuel took a breath and lifted his hand slowly. The auctioneer pointed toward him. "We have 200. "Do I hear more?" The crowd stayed silent. 150. No one spoke. 100. No other hands went up. The hammer came down with a loud crack on the wood. Sold Carter Ranch to Mr. Samuel Hayes. Samuel felt both excitement and fear run through him. He had just bought a ranch. His ranch. It might have been cheap, but to him it was everything. That afternoon, Samuel went to the courthouse to sign the papers. The clerk was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who handed him a stack of documents. "Congratulations," the clerk said. "You own Carter Ranch now. Is there anything I should know about the place?" Samuel asked. The clerk adjusted his glasses. "Just what everyone else knows. The previous owner, Mr. Carter, passed away last winter. Left the ranch behind in his will. It's been empty since." "Empty?" Samuel repeated. The clerk hesitated for a moment. Mostly, Samuel didn't think much of it. Maybe the clerk meant a few animals still roamed the land, or perhaps an old caretaker remained. Either way, he didn't mind. He had dealt with worse. The next morning, before the sun fully rose, Samuel packed his few belongings, mounted his horse, and headed toward his new home. The road was long and dry, with golden fields stretching far and wide. The wind carried the scent of grass, and the sound of birds filled the quiet air. As he rode closer, he could see the ranch in the distance, an old house, a big barn with a slanted roof, a line of fences stretching toward the horizon. When Samuel reached the front gate, he stopped. The sign on the fence still read, "Carter Ranch." The wood was weathered, but the letters were bold. He pushed the gate open and rode down the dirt path to the house. It was quiet, too quiet. He dismounted slowly and walked toward the porch. Then he saw her. A young woman stood at the top of the steps, her arms crossed, her chin lifted in quiet strength. Her hair, the color of warm autumn leaves, was tied back loosely. She wore a simple dress, dusty at the hem but neat. Her eyes met his with a look that was neither shy nor fearful. It was steady, like someone who had already decided she wouldn't be easily moved. Samuel stopped in his tracks. He hadn't expected anyone to be there. "Can I help you?" she asked firmly. This is Carter Ranch," Samuel said carefully. "Yes," she replied. "It is. I bought it at the auction yesterday." She tilted her head slightly but didn't move. "Then you must be Mr. Hayes," Samuel nodded. "That's right." For a long moment neither of them spoke. The wind brushed past them, making the loose boards on the porch creak softly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she finally said. "This ranch may have been sold, but I'm not going anywhere." Samuel blinked. "I don't follow." She took a slow step forward, her hands no longer crossed but resting at her sides. "My name is Evelyn Carter. This was my husband's ranch. When he passed, everything came under the conditions of his will, and according to that will, I can stay here as long as I choose." Samuel felt his mouth go dry. The clerk hadn't mentioned this. He had thought he was buying an empty ranch, not one with someone living on it. He cleared his throat. "I didn't know about that." Evelyn gave a small, steady nod. "Most don't, but the papers are clear. The land may have changed hands, but this is still my home." Samuel looked around. The house, though old, had a certain quiet charm. The porch railing was polished. Flowers bloomed in a few clay pots by the steps. Whoever Evelyn Carter was, she had kept the place alive when the world thought it was abandoned. "I suppose that makes things complicated," Samuel said after a pause. She gave the faintest hint of a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It usually does." Samuel spent the next hour walking the property, trying to take it all in. The fences were leaning, but still fixable. The barn needed repair, but the foundation was strong. The grass was dry but thick, good grazing land for cattle. And the view stretched for miles, with golden hills and open skies that seemed to go on forever. But every time he looked back at the house, he saw Evelyn on the porch, watching him with quiet, careful eyes. She didn't seem unkind, just firm. This was her home, and now it was his too. Whether they liked it or not, their lives had just become entangled. That night, Samuel set up a small fire outside near the barn. He sat on an old wooden crate, sipping water from a tin cup, and stared up at the wide western sky. Stars filled the darkness like lanterns, bright and silent. He had always imagined that owning land would feel simple. A clean start, a new chapter. But nothing about this was simple. He hadn't just bought land. He had stepped into someone else's story. Inside the house, Evelyn sat by the window with a lamp on the table. She watched the quiet man outside, unsure what to make of him. He didn't look like a troublemaker. He looked tired, like someone who had been carrying dreams for a long time. Still, she wasn't going to give up the only home she had ever known, not for anyone. As the night wind rustled through the dry grass, both of them sat in silence. Two strangers tied together by a ranch. Neither of them wanted to give up. Neither of them knew what would come next. But one thing was clear. This was only the beginning of a story neither of them had planned for. Samuel Hayes woke before sunrise. The sky was painted in soft orange and pink, and the fields around Carter Ranch were covered in a thin layer of silver mist. The air was cool and the world felt quiet, like the land was still waking up. He walked out to the porch where he found Evelyn already up, holding a basket in her hand. She was feeding the hens near the side fence. Her hair was tied back and the light touched her face softly. "Morning," Samuel said, still a little unsure how to speak to her. She gave him a small nod. "Morning." They weren't friends. Not yet, but they also weren't enemies. They were two people standing on the same ground, trying to figure out what it meant to share something neither of them had planned for. After their uneasy start, they had slowly begun to find a rhythm. Evelyn didn't speak much, but she kept the house in order with quiet strength. She milked the cow every morning, fed the chickens, and watered the little patch of garden near the porch. Samuel, on the other hand, spent most of his time outside. He fixed the broken fence posts, cleared the barn of old hay, and checked the windmill that had been silent for months. He had imagined owning a ranch alone. But instead, every step he took, he was aware of her presence. Not in a way that troubled him, but in a way that made the empty ranch feel strangely alive. As days turned into weeks, the two of them began to talk more. Not long conversations, just small exchanges, simple words that started to build a kind of quiet understanding between them. One afternoon, while he was repairing the fence, Evelyn walked over with a canteen of water. She handed it to him without saying much. Samuel wiped the sweat from his forehead and gave a small smile. "Thank you," he said. "You're doing good work on the fence," she replied. "Trying to make it stand strong again," he answered. "This land deserves better." She looked at the field stretching beyond the fence. "My husband built this fence with his own hands. I used to help him." Samuel didn't know what to say. He wasn't here to erase anyone's past. He just wanted a future. But in that quiet moment, he realized she wasn't just some stranger living on the land. This place held pieces of her heart. The next few weeks brought warm days and golden sunsets. Slowly, the ranch began to change. The fences were upright again. The windmill creaked back to life, spinning lazily in the breeze. The barn, once filled with dust and cobwebs, now had clean floors and neatly stacked hay. Samuel brought in a few cattle he bought with the little money he had left. Evelyn continued to tend the garden and house, keeping everything neat and warm. But the biggest change was not in the ranch. It was in the way they looked at each other. At first, Evelyn saw Samuel as an outsider, someone who came to claim what wasn't truly his. But the more she watched him work, quietly, patiently, without trying to push her away, the more she saw that he respected the land. He didn't try to take her home away from her. Instead, he tried to build something alongside it. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky turned deep orange, they sat together on the porch for the first time. Samuel leaned back in the old wooden chair. Evelyn sat a little distance away holding a cup of tea. They watched the horizon without speaking. "It's a good view," Samuel finally said. "It's the best part of this place," she replied softly. He turned to look at her. "You really love this ranch, don't you?" She nodded slowly. "I was 16 when I came here. It's not just land to me. It's where I grew up, where I learned to work, where I felt safe. I don't know where I'd go if I left." Samuel looked down at his hands. "I didn't know that when I bought it. I just saw a chance to build a life. I didn't know it already belonged to someone in a different way." For the first time, Evelyn smiled at him. A real smile. "Maybe it can belong to both of us." Those words stayed with Samuel for days. Their partnership began to grow naturally after that evening. Samuel handled the heavy work outside, the fence repairs, tending to the cattle, clearing the fields. Evelyn managed the house, the garden, and the small but growing chicken coop. They didn't step on each other's toes. They worked side by side like two steady hands slowly shaping the same piece of clay. As spring deepened, rain finally came. The dry fields turned green and wildflowers bloomed along the fence line. Birds sang from the trees. The ranch no longer felt empty. It felt alive, warm, and full of promise. One afternoon, a group of travelers passing through town stopped by the ranch, asking for water and a place to rest for a short while. Samuel welcomed them with kindness, and Evelyn prepared cool water from the well. As the travelers sat under the shade, one of them said, "We heard folks say Carter Ranch was falling apart, but it looks beautiful now." Samuel glanced at Evelyn, and she looked at him. In that small, shared glance, they both felt something new. Pride. They had done this together. Every day wasn't easy. There were mornings when the pump wouldn't work, when the cattle wandered off too far, or when storms rolled in from the west, making everything muddy and slow. But even on the hardest days, Samuel noticed something he hadn't felt in years. He didn't feel alone. One night, the wind howled across the prairie and the rain fell hard against the roof. The sound of thunder rumbled far in the distance, but inside the house it was warm. Evelyn lit a small lamp and placed it on the kitchen table. Samuel sat opposite her, boots wet and hair damp from running out to make sure the barn doors were secure. She poured him a warm drink and handed it to him without a word. He accepted it, feeling a quiet sense of peace. The world outside might be wild, but inside this house there was something steady and safe. They started sharing more stories during those quiet nights. Evelyn told him about her childhood, how she had first arrived at the ranch with her family, how she had learned to care for animals, and how she had built a life here. Samuel shared stories of the open road, of the towns he had seen, the hard work he had done, and the dreams that kept him moving forward. Their laughter filled the house softly, like a warm light in the dark. By the time summer arrived, the change in both of them was clear. Samuel had built a home, not just a place with walls and fences, but something deeper. Evelyn had stopped calling it my ranch and started calling it our ranch. Without either of them planning it, something gentle had grown between them. It wasn't loud or rushed. It was quiet and real, like the slow growth of roots beneath the soil. One golden evening, Samuel walked down the field, the sunset glowing behind him. Evelyn followed, carrying a basket with fresh vegetables from the garden. The land stretched before them, no longer broken, no longer empty. The fences were strong, the fields full, and the house warm with light. Evelyn looked at the horizon and then at Samuel. "You've changed this place," she said. He shook his head slowly. "No, we changed it." Her smile widened, soft and honest. She looked at the home that had once been hers alone, and for the first time, she felt it wasn't something she had to hold on to with clenched fists. It was something she could share. Samuel didn't have a fancy way with words, but as they stood there together, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't just respect anymore. It was trust. And with trust came something even stronger: hope. That night the stars were brighter than he had ever seen. The wind was soft and the fields whispered with the sound of crickets. Samuel sat on the porch, leaning against the railing, while Evelyn sat beside him. Neither of them said much. They didn't need to. The man who had once bought a cheap ranch now understood that what he had truly found was a home. And the woman who had once feared losing everything realized she had gained something new, someone who cared for the land as much as she did. The Carter Ranch was no longer just a piece of land with a story. It had become their story. A story of quiet beginnings, unexpected partnership, and something stronger than either of them had planned for. And under the endless Wild West sky, their shared story had only just begun.